Scientists have been creating the unimaginable, editing our DNA, bringing back the woolly mammoth, and creating animals that glow in the dark. Let's check them out. Twins in China have had their DNA rewritten to make them immune to HIV. Named Lulu and Nana, a scientist by the name of Jianku thought it would be a great idea to attempt at editing DNA with the insane CRISPR-Cas9 tool, which allows you to pretty much edit genes to your own volition. Jianku did this with a specific protein cell in the DNA that is supposedly the main cause as to why people contact HIV. They have become immune to this now. However, he did not get off scot-free. Jianku was severely punished for this, with researchers stating he has seriously went against academic ethics and codes of conduct. Right now, when it comes to gene editing, there are still a lot of countries that are against this, especially when it's done on human embryos. Despite his motivation behind this, trying to better humanity, people did not respond well in one bit. Now, these two girls will forever be looked over for the rest of their lives. Scientists have successfully recreated the woolly mammoth, but their DNA is ironically in one of the world's smallest mammals. Meet the woolly mice, rodents that have been genetically modified so that they can carry the woolly mammoth genes. They came out looking absolutely adorable, rocking long, curly, and poofy fur like the woolly mammoth counterparts, which grow 3 times longer than the average mice. One scientist stated, "I think the ability to edit multiple genes at the same time in mice, and to do so and obtain the expected woolly appearance, is a very important step." These mice underwent 8 different edits to reach the desired effect that they wanted, but this dream project also resulted in them spending $100 million. Rightfully, the public didn't appreciate so much money being put into a passion project when it could have been used on more important things. But what are your thoughts on that? Scientists have created miniature brains that are bits and pieces from other people, all into one. Organoids are something that have been in the works for decades. It gives scientists a really cool way at observing human body parts without actually having to use a human body part, but rather making their own tinier versions of them to play around with. The downside that they have been facing for a while though when it came to these experiments, they were very limited when it only came from one person, and just doing tests based on one person's DNA isn't the best. So instead what they did is made these tiny brains made out of multiple people, giving them more of a better understanding with how brain disorders affect multiple people rather than just one. It was quite the experiment because as they were doing these tests, they saw how different parts of the brain reacted differently to one another, and they started making discoveries that people with autism are more likely to develop larger brains in the second trimester compared to those without the disorder. We are growing fully functioning limbs inside of labs now. With the high demand of organ transplants and other major issues, doctors simply just cannot keep up. So scientists are taking it upon themselves to grow body parts inside of their labs just so that there is another source to pull from. Before though, they were doing it with growing human parts inside of animals. Now they're using only stem cells and working from the ground up. This was done before with one patient, where they used his stem cells and made new veins for him that they then transplanted inside. However, with new breakthroughs such as these, there's always going to be complications. One researcher said, "The composite nature of our parts makes building a functionally biological replacement particularly challenging. Parts contain muscles, bones, cartilage, blood vessels, tendons, ligaments, and nerves, each of which has to be rebuilt and requires a specific supporting structure called the matrix." Scientists grew brains in a lab that grew their own eyes, even though they technically cannot see anything right now, and in fact they're just the sockets for actual eyes. It's really amazing how a mini lab brain was able to produce them. As we've seen with the other brain organoids, there have been recent studies that showed that they are able to create their own brain waves as well. The level that they're at right now though is similar to a preterm embryo, so not terribly developed just yet, but the fact that they were able to create their own eye sockets was mesmerizing. It's significantly important though, because with experiments and studies like these, scientists will be able to determine eye disorders or brain-to-eye coordination, whatever you call it, during the early stages of pregnancy. They've come so far that 72% of these organoids were able to respond to light and tried developing their own lens and corneal tissue. two-headed dogs, mice with human brains inside of them, and even human butts. These are the next generation of hybrid experiments that scientists wanted to keep secret. Rabbits can now glow green in the dark. In Turkey, scientists have been playing around with the idea of injecting a fluorescent gene that's found in jellyfish into specific animals. This has been done on cats and dogs before, but now it's shown to work on rabbits. They first isolated the glowing gene in rabbit embryos before they mixed them together, transferred them into a surrogate rabbit, and thankfully 8 rabbits were able to be produced. This is a very important step when it comes to seeing how different genes from different species interact with each other. With these ones being so highly successful, and the rabbits showcasing their green hue, this is another step forward towards humanity being able to transfer genes into each other from other animals. It's a great theoretical way of one day hopefully treating genetic issues, and no longer needing to worry about the body rejecting them. Would you choose to glow green if you could? Mice have been given human butts. In 2011, scientists did the impossible by perfectly replicating a human sphincter inside of a lab rat, having all the important components that a human does. What was even more great about this is that even after weeks once the transplant was done, the rodents' bodies were still carrying blood supply and other nutrients to the area accordingly. This part of the human body is extremely important when it comes to controlling a person's bowel movements, so by going through with this experiment, they are able to both observe and maybe find a way to one day transfer this over to humans who suffer with bowel movement issues. Using lab mice is a great tool since they have suppressed immune systems, allowing them to experiment on them so that their body doesn't reject it. A mad scientist did the impossible by sewing together 2 dogs' heads. In the mid-20th century, experiments of playing with life were all the rage, and scientists wanted to see how far they could get with it. Usually out in nature, when we see something like this, the animals suffer with what's known as polycephaly, where their heads are fused together before birth. What made this very different is that scientists wanted to do this manually in hopes that one day they would be able to transplant human heads to another. But obviously, considering the times, it was very cruel and inhumane for the dogs. The public was absolutely furious by these experiments, especially when this was during a time where there was no proper equipment that could be implemented for these creations. It's quite sad to think about it, but it's also paved the way at creating new rules in the scientific world that keeps these sorts of experiments out permanently. Chickens are being created without their feathers. Apparently farmers have been having a very difficult time keeping up with the demands of the world, and plucking chicken feathers is taking up too much of it. So scientists in Israel came up with the brilliant idea of creating chickens in a natural way, so they claim, without their feathers to bypass all of that. Of course though, they have their feathers for a reason, and despite this speeding up a process in one way, it's costing them a lot more money in different ways. With farmers who work in colder climates, chickens rely on their feathers to keep them warm, so now they're spending more money in keeping their pens cozy. Even in the warmer climate areas, when roosters mate with chickens, they latch onto them with their nails, and the feathers are meant to soften that blow, and an injured hen with a bunch of other hens does not end well together. What are your thoughts on this? Scientists have put pieces of human brains into mice. If you recall the brain organoids, the miniature version of a human brain, scientists thought it would be a great idea to try and use some of the pieces from them to fix incorrections in mice brains. It actually patched up some of the neuron injuries that the rat was experiencing. They are hoping that this new strategy can one day be used on humans with brain disorders, hopefully being able to repair intense damage done on the brain, whether it be from physical related injuries, failed surgeries, or even strokes. The reason though for the rats is to see if they could fix their visual cortex, and it worked. They were able to recognize light cues among other things. The only scary thing though is that the human part of the rat's brain began to grow a little bit more, which is slightly alarming to me, but we shall wait and see. Do you have a favorite hybrid or crossbreed experiment? Let me know down below and I'll be sure to talk about it in the next video.